The movies that came out in 2019 were a feast for the eyes. Hollywood special effects artists built things from scratch, while actors and stunt people alike risked it all for the perfect shot. Meanwhile, new breakthroughs in CGI and animation helped us see the world like we've never seen it before. Here's a behind-the-scenes peek at some of the films of 2019. In Jordan Peele's Us, a family faces off against their murderous doppelgangers. To allow Lupita Nyong'o and the rest of the cast to act alongside themselves, they didn't rely simply on the classic split-screen technique typically used in twin movies. Because the actors had to play two characters, they had to shoot each scene twice, each time opposite a body double. Then the FX team did extensive face and body replacements to create final shots like this one, where Nyong'o is face-to-face with her body double. And to create this terrifying shot, where the little girl is being choked by her doppelganger, actress Madison Curry actually gripped a green paper cup, which would later be digitally replaced with her own face. Captain Marvel was the role Oscar winner Brie Larson was born to play. To get in shape for the role, Larson worked with trainer Jason Walsh, doing everything from lunges to chain push-ups. She trained with him for about 9 months before Captain Marvel started shooting. All of that training allowed her to do stunts like this. Disney's first live-action remake of the year gave us an adorable CGI version of the big-eared elephant, but somebody still had to play Dumbo on set. So Disney employed a creature performer and stunt double to give the cast something to interact with and to help the visual effects team better animate Dumbo's movements in post-production. The actor had to learn to walk like an elephant and also how to move around on stilts. Yet another movie proved that stop-motion animation isn't dead. But we probably don't need to tell you that anymore. The sheer amount of effort can be seen in some of the numbers. The animation team made 106,000 character faces and built 110 sets covering 65 unique locations. One sequence involving a collapsing ice bridge took over a year to shoot. Link, meanwhile, was incredibly complicated to construct. The puppet stood 16 inches tall and had to be covered in fake fur, as moving around stop-motion puppets covered in real hair can be incredibly difficult. Pixar, meanwhile, proved yet again that it's not even close to done changing the animation game with Toy Story 4. Each breakthrough in Pixar animation helps the team animate the next movie better. For instance, thanks to its work on Rain and Rivers in Ratatouille, and The Good Dinosaur, it was able to create the opening downpour in Toy Story 4. Meanwhile, fur is typically an incredibly difficult thing to animate, which is why you rarely saw stuffed animals in earlier Toy Story movies. But now, thanks to Monsters, Inc., it's not so hard for Pixar, which allowed Ducky and Bunny to shine, as well as this realistic cat, just compared to Sid's dog from the original Toy Story. And years of perfecting shiny surfaces allowed animators to really bring out Bo Peep's porcelain skin, making her look like a much more convincing doll. Much of this had to do with how the character was lit. The team found that only circular lights with no sharp edges would reflect well on porcelain. Thanks to the Lion King reboot, the lines between CGI, animation, and live action were blurred. The movie was shot on a real stage, had actors in it, yet it was completely animated. The movie used what was called virtual production. It was filmed using virtual reality, which allowed the crew to actually step inside the animated worlds it created and better stage scenes. Part of what made the world feel so realistic was the scatter tool, which the visual effects team at MPC Film developed while working on The Jungle Book. It allowed the team to sprinkle elements like rocks, leaves, and twigs across the surface, instead of having to place each element there one by one. While the goal for The Lion King was to make all the animals as realistic as possible, they couldn't stray too far from fan favorites. Take the iconic shot of Rafiki lifting Simba on Pride Rock. In the original version, Rafiki stands. In the new version, he sits. That's because actual mandrills can't really stand up like that, so they let him sit, but shot him at an angle so you still feel the same overwhelming sense of emotion. The live-action reboot of Aladdin got a little help with some heavy helpings of CGI. For the scenes where Genie is in his blue form, Will Smith's movements were captured via a motion capture suit. For A Whole New World, actors Mina Massoud and Naomi Scott sat on a 15-foot high rig, while a rough version of what we'd see behind them in the finished product was projected on the screen. But there are some things you just can't fake, like the impressive stunts in the opening chase sequence, and of course, Will Smith's dance moves. Practical effects didn't die in 2019. In fact, they flourished. For the surreal musical numbers in the Elton John biopic Rocket Man, actor Taron Egerton was lifted by wires when he plays Crocodile Rock at the Troubadour, and he actually did another scene completely underwater. The actor spent months learning to sing and perform just like Elton for the role. Tom Holland and his stunt doubles had to be prepared for lots of web slinging and jumping. Things got especially intense during the movie scenes in Venice, Italy. But the tour de force here was the sequence of Mysterio's illusions, which involved complicated CGI done by Framestore. Among the most difficult things for the team to pull off were the transitions within the scene from one type of environment to another. For the scene in which Spider-Man looks at his reflection in shards of glass, the VFX team had to create 20 individual Spider-Man suits, and it used other Marvel movies as influences. For example, the many broken robots, complete with hanging wires and broken metal, as seen in Avengers Age of Ultron, inspired the look of the zombie Iron Man suit. With all that work, it's no wonder it took 9 months to make. John Wick 3 proved yet again what makes this beloved action franchise so awesome. But this time, it wasn't just Keanu Reeves killing it, he was joined by Halle Berry. Reeves began training for the film at least 5 months before, working on everything from martial arts to weapons. Berry, a newcomer to the John Wick universe, also went through intense training. Berry said she trained to fight both like Keanu and with him, in very close proximity. John Wick 3 shows how many considerations go into an action scene that you'd never believe. Take, for example, this instantly iconic sequence in which Reeves rides a horse through the streets of New York. Horses can't actually run on tarmac, so they covered the road with mats and still managed to get the perfect shot. And speaking of practical action, this Fast and Furious spin-off was chock full of it. Stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Jason Statham, and Idris Elba were of course actively involved. One of the movie's coolest scenes, involving jumping out a window and running off the side of a building, was done in front of a blue screen and involved impressive wire and rope work. Training for the movie was intense, but that'll happen when your movie is directed by a former stunt guy. This action movie was divisive, but its technical achievements are still admirable. Creating a younger Will Smith to act alongside the present-day Will Smith involved a mix of motion capture and CGI. This wasn't just de-aging or facial replacement. The VFX team created a whole other human digitally, meaning Will Smith was actually still playing his younger self. The special effects team at Spectral Motion had a difficult task, adapting popular source material that didn't offer a ton of visuals to work off of. Yet the team still nailed it. Instead of puppets, they put actual performers inside these monsters, like noted creature performer Javier Botet. Meanwhile, the moves of Troy James from America's Got Talent were perfect for the jangly man. But of course, some CGI was still used for touch-ups, as well as some of those little details that are just too hard to get practically. The combo of practical effects and having actual performers play these monsters really helped bring the book's classic 2D sketches to life. The biggest box office success of 2019 was epic in every sense. For the scene in which Captain America fights a past version of himself, Chris Evans actually shot both sides of the fight. For the moments in which the two Caps interacted, they got a body double, whose face was later replaced digitally with Evans' face. Originally, neither Cap had a helmet on. However, the VFX team later added a helmet to one of them so the audience could follow along easier. And were you convinced by how Cap looked as an old man at the end of the movie? The team used an older skin double, who'd have a similar age and shape as older Cap, and combined that with Evans' face. Another major transformation was Thor's weight gain. Chris Hemsworth wore a convincing prosthetic bodysuit on set. And how exactly did they put together the massive final battle against Thanos and his army? And how did they get so many Hollywood A-listers in the same place for the payoff of the decade? Thank green screens for that. The latest Terminator sequel returned to its roots, reuniting stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. The epic car chase in Mexico was actually shot in Spain. It featured a lot of committed stunt drivers, and many cars were destroyed in the process. Much of the CGI might look familiar. The Rev 9's liquid metal is a callback to the legendary T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. But they did do something unique with CGI here. They de-aged Schwarzenegger and Hamilton, as well as Terminator 2 star Edward Furlong, to create a never-before-seen flashback. For this scene, body doubles played young T-800, Sarah Connor, and John Connor. The original actors' faces were then placed on the body doubles during post-production. De-aging is becoming much more common, to the point it's barely shocking anymore, but prepare to see a lot more of it in the years ahead. What were some of your favorite effects of 2019?